everyone, welcome to Type Talks. Today we're here to talk about better living through the MBTI with Dove, and he's an ENFP.
Hi, everybody. Glad to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have you. And I was wondering if you could give us some background on you for people who are new to you.
Sure. So I'm an executive coach that specializes in presence and helping leaders show up with that warmth, power, and presence that will make people find them interesting enough and want to take notice. So many of my clients have been doing their work for decades, and putting their head down and doing better work is not going to get them to the next level. So how are they holding themselves and thinking about themselves, and what's their story?
Very cool. Being able to have presence is a really amazing thing to have at work. Being good at your job only gets you so far. So the other 75% of the way is being able to put yourself out there and letting yourself shine in that kind of way. And so very cool, very cool. And so I'm wondering, Dove, how can we live better using the 16 types?
Well, for me, it's just more information, and I find people fascinating, and I find the dynamic between people even more fascinating. It's not just people, but it's the relationship between people. And so the MBTI just gives you this great format to start ordering the world around you and start recognizing people and start recognizing, why they fit together and where they butt heads. Right? Like, there's a great story of one of the things that was going on with Jung when he was coming up with this, is that he was watching Freud and Joseph Adler argue, and he realized they're not arguing about the thing. They're just coming at it from very different perspectives, right? So that's what's so interesting for me in married life, constantly in life. If you're interested in learning about yourself, then it just gets deeper as you recognize why you're drawn to certain things or repelled by certain things.
It is very useful for that. You relate it back to chemistry, and you talk about how it's not the objects itself. Chemistry is the relationship between objects. And so type really helps you understand that. And so I was wondering, Dove, if you could tell us a little bit about your dynamic with your INFJ and with your INFJ preference partner and how that is.
Right. So my wife is an INFJ, and it's been really interesting since as a extrovert intuitor, I live in the immediate future. And I'm always thinking ahead of what's next tomorrow, like this, setting up, I'll get up to move the lights, what's coming down the pike. And Darcy, as an introverted intuitor, sees in the far future. And so that has been a really interesting pairing to grow and live with. And I, because there's certain things I can't argue with her about because she's thought about it a lot more than I have. And I really appreciate the stillness and the depth that she brings. But one story I'll tell you, which is more on our extroverted, introverted scale, is that when we were getting married, we went to the place that we were going to get married 6 weeks before and had a little weekend vacation, pre-wedding, and it was great. And I remember at one point, it was under the night sky and all these stars out in Northern California, and I said to her, hey, if you need help with anything with the wedding, because she was doing most of everything, let me know. And I got to be honest, I felt really good about myself for stopping and saying, hey, let me know what I can do. And my INFJ wife said, I have been. And what I realized was she had been, but she had told me like an introvert, which is she told me once. Now, as an extrovert, if it's something important, I'm going to mention it 3 or 4 different times. So if I don't hear it 3 or 4 different times, it's really not going to make an impression that it's something I have to do. And it was a great learning lesson there of being like, oh, she's only going to say things once. This is how her mannerisms are and her level of communication. And so I have to listen more and be more proactive. That was, we learned it, during the wedding process.
It is so true. Introverts don't say it enough, and extroverts tend to repeat a lot of the things that they find important. So right. you hear a lot of it if it's important.
Right. And then if you're in a relationship, right, you're always tallying back and forth with each other. So, in this way, like, we might talk more than we want to because our partner talks so little. And then we're out of preference a little bit, or we're doing all the organizing and we don't want to do all of it. We just want to do some of it. So we do this dance with the people that are close in our life as well. And that's why it's always good to check in and be like, I want to do this. I have a preference for this, but I don't want to do it. I didn't sign on to do it all the time. Right. Mm-hmm. So I say that to couples, like it's very good after every couple of years to re-examine some of the contracts you've made in the beginning of your relationship. Like maybe you don't always want to be the one that does the ordering of the food or does the cooking or does the taxes or whatever you kind of fell into in the beginning of the relationship. It's good to think about again, especially within this lens of type.
It is good to reevaluate our fundamental contracts because we might have different conditions now and that suit us better. So that we don't have to keep doing things that we don't like as much. So yeah.
And things change. Like one of my favorite authors is Milan Kundera, and he's got a great line which says, "Oh, lovers, be wary of the contracts you make in the first weeks of love. If you bring breakfast to bed in the very beginning, that's what they're going to expect." Right. But to your point about contracts, the more you understand yourself, the more you realize, oh, I never really liked organizing the whole PTA, but I got stuck doing that. Like, and I see why my dad had done it or whatever. But when we can see these patterns play out and then we can actually make this decision, I used to do that. I don't want to do that. Right. I don't like it. And that's why, like, you know, in life coaching or career coaching, so often you could say, well, what do you actually like to do? And now let's find a job that helps you do more of that. You know, do you want to be surrounded by people all day or do you want to have no people around and you just can add up your spreadsheets? Like, let's figure out what, you know, give you energy.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes life is about maximizing the amount of flow states that you can have. And so that's really good. Yeah. There's a saying in type that it takes a lot of energy to be who you're not. And so when you're able to find things that give you energy or that you enjoy doing, you have more bandwidth for it. So you don't always feel fatigued. And so
absolutely. I mean, you know, that's why you get to a certain age and in dating and you realize, oh, I'm just going to be myself. Because otherwise I'm going to meet this person and turn myself into a little bit of a pretzel because I think that's who they want. And if this relationship works, now I'm stuck being this pretzel. And so you get to this point of like, I'm just going to, you know, be me, and that works because it's exhausting to be somebody else. And so we do that so often at work when we don't bring our whole selves to work. And so what I like to say is the sexiest thing in the world, whether it's on a date or a job interview, is the person has a sense of who they are. You know, and so someone's saying, oh, you know, well, I like to, you know, I really like to be in charge, or, you know, I like to do things behind the scenes, or whatever they're, you know, like, oh, interesting. Or like, I love working with concrete and details and following. That's my thing, you know? And so when I was in high school, they did an MBTI with us without even, I don't remember being aware that that's what they called it. But what I remembered about it before I ever learned about type decades later was that I was highly intuitive and what that meant, you know, and the lack of interest I had in concrete details and what things were, and was always interested in what they could mean. And it was very informative. And I try to do it with, you know, friends of mine whose kids are like, you know, graduating high school, going to college, being like, you know, a little self-knowledge is really exciting.
yeah, and it helps explain things that were really hard to put into words before. It's like, oh, that's why I felt alien. That's why that explains a lot of the difference I've had in my life. The topic of INFJ and ENFP is very interesting to me. So I'm wondering, did you notice any other areas in which you differed from your wife and that you had to learn to communicate better?
Oh, I mean, yeah, absolutely. I mean, for those of you that are familiar with INFJs and that dominant introvert intuiting, they're not always the clearest communicators. You know, they can talk. My wife needs to talk sometimes a lot to figure out what she's going to say. To take it back to my wedding, it was hilarious because we did our own vows and she just talked and talked. It was beautiful. It was great, but just like was all over the place. And so, whereas as an extrovert intuitor, I like to think out loud and talk out loud just to figure out what I'm going to say. And it really comes out fast and clear. And, you know, Darcy has been thinking about it for a long time. And it's really hard for that introvert intuitor to get what's clear in their head out into the world and to make that transition. And so it can sometimes be really roundabout. And it's usually about something really deep and important. You know, if it's not interesting or it's not very deep, she's probably not even going to talk about it. But if it is important and she's trying to really communicate it, it can be really hard to follow.
I hear that a lot with the preference of intuition. It can be hard for people to follow depending on the speaker too. So it's like intuition is not the most concrete form of communicating.
That's what I say. It only needs 3 dots to plot a line, you know, and then you can figure out exactly where it's all going. But like watching it turn and figure that out is interesting. And then, another thing is just, our energy levels around people, especially before COVID, it was trying to learn, like as an ENFP, I'm not only about the party, I'm about the after party. Where's the after party? Let's keep going. More people, more is better. It's like part of an ENFP's, logo. More is better. And Darcy, as an INFJ, is like, the party was good. I'm done. There's no, if you got me to go to the party, that's great. It's not like she's a shut-in, but there's no reason in the world that she would be interested in an after party.
It's moving towards the energy or moving away from the energy of the outside world.
And so I would say as a couple, what I had to learn was to let go of sometimes she just doesn't come, right? It could be a dinner party we're going to with, I don't know, 5 couples, 8 couples, or a bigger party than that. And I'm all set. And at first, when she didn't want to go, I kind of took it personally. I wanted my partner. I wanted to go. And so over time, as our relationship, I realized, oh, she's just not, if you're not feeling it, you're faking it, as a friend of mine likes to say. And so I, no interest being around someone that's faking it. And in some ways, that's what this is all about. Like the more you understand other people, you recognize, oh, it's not just that they're being difficult. It's not, they just have a different level of comfort with different things and they don't want to do it. So don't be faking it. Go do your thing. It's very liberating.
The removal of masks is very liberating indeed. It seems like you do a lot of work in organizations. And so I'm wondering about, how does type appear in organizations? How does the ENFP personality type appear in the workplace?
Well, frequently the ENFP is, people love working for them because they make things fun and they don't like a lot of conflict. So if you have an ENFP, a leader that's successful, it is going to be a happy team, a team that kind of celebrates. They're out and about, out of their office a lot. They're accessible, and they're very good at making people feel seen, heard, and valued. I remember this one ENFP leader that I was talking to, one of his team, and someone had asked, well, what does he do? What does the leader do? And half jokingly, half not, the team member said, yeah, I don't know. And the ENFP was thrilled. That's great. If you don't know what I do and I have everything working like that, I don't need it to revolve around me. That's great. Just kind of doing it that way. When an ENFP is struggling, it's going to be often because they haven't addressed a conflict issue. They haven't decided, they don't have the stomach to sit down and tell someone that they're struggling, and try to get an improvement plan or fix a situation. They kind of want to avoid it. There's this book, what is it called? I'll have to remember the book, but there's an idea called ruinous empathy, which is when too much empathy and you're not telling. So what happens is, I'm afraid to tell you you're not doing well, right, Joyce? And your performance reviews are okay. And then 8 months later, I call you in and tell you you're fired. And that is not the right thing to do, right? Because you're like, you didn't tell me. I didn't know I was failing. I didn't know this. And so that's where an ENFP can get into trouble. So there, and also structure, right? You got to have enough structure. So what I say is, if you're not great on structure, make sure you have someone right under you that is, and empower them, right? So as a leader, you don't have to be great at everything, but you have to recognize what's important and be able to delegate and empower people to make it work as a whole.
Well put, well put. Yeah, an ENFP leader seems like quite the fun leader to work under. And they also don't seem that persnickety about getting all the credit for something. They're okay with spreading the credit, it seems
often when they're healthy. Yeah, I thought you were going to say persnickety about the details, and that's the other thing that an ENFP can sometimes, get a little caught on the details. So I've always wanted to have lots of, ISTJs and ESTJs working with me so they can make sure that, everything goes out on time and on budget.
Yeah, that's really good. Having someone to cover your blind spots for you is a really good. Yeah,
absolutely. And then going back to relationships, because we're in this time where adults have so few friends, especially married adults and married adults with children, that we kind of expect our partner to do all of it. And I can't expect my INFJ partner to give me all the socialization that I need. I got to go out and make sure I find that with other friends, and not put too much pressure on one point. So that's another way of, like, the self-knowledge lets you realize what you need in your life and who to ask for it.
You're right. With empathy, it can cause a lying by omission. So forgetting to say things that are really important, or leaving out important things that might hurt people. So it's like, I can put off this comment. It might hurt this person, and then forgetting to say it all entirely.
Yeah. I would say, something in the last, so I'm 52, right? Or I'm almost 52. And I would say something in the last 10 years that's come online for me is that introverted feeling that realizes exactly that you're not doing anybody any favors by not telling them the truth. And so I have gotten much better at not just giving feedback in the workplace and in life, but being proactive about it. Like looking ahead to see this is what needs to happen. And now at any more time than now, you're just kind of putting it off. And so as I matured, getting better at that and having those difficult conversations and realizing they're okay. That's how we grow.
Makes sense. So Dove, would you like to talk about times in which ENFPs have gotten into trouble?
Sure. So, as an ENFP, in the fourth position is my introverted sensing. And if you want to see me really lose it, watch me try to print something out as I'm running out the door for something important and I can't get the printer to work. And I can't get it to work and I keep doing the same thing and I can feel myself getting hotter. And then my inner critic kicks in. Why did I leave this to the last minute? Why did I think this was going to work? And I just get so incredibly frustrated by not being able to make the technology work. So it's a detail that I left and trying to be in the world of, in concrete things and make this machine work, or formatting. I would much rather write a whole report than have to format it. Formatting can make me crazy, and I can feel myself even when I will, call in my INFJ wife for help. This is not her ballywick either. Neither one of us are really in the sensing world. That can be a problem. And I've tried to, I've tried to work on it, but I'm amazed that, even after all this time, it can rear up just like that and flare up. And you're like, oh my God, here I am. I'm caught in the grip of this thing. It's super stressful and I can't get out of it.
Yeah, those pesky little details, sometimes they make a world of difference. And you're like, oh no, if only I did that one detail right, then things would be way different. So there's an ENTP called Richard Feynman, and he is a Nobel Prize winner. And he would have won 2 Nobel Prizes if it weren't for his inferior SI. So he just forgot to refrigerate his specimen or something similar to that. And it's like, wow, that one SI detail can change everything. It's like...
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's like living in the real world. But it's interesting because like as an ENFP, my extroverted thinking is in my third, and I just don't value structure that much, and I never have. And to my detriment, I've worked to do it more, and I do my taxes and stuff. But so now I have my daughter who's 13, and trying to get her out of the house and to school on time is always, it's not a battle because I won't let it be a battle, but it's difficult. And so often we are leaving late for school. And I have this whole push-pull. I don't want her to be late for school, but I don't really value getting into a fight about these 5 minutes and getting her there. And it's tough for me to toe that line, especially for something that I don't really value. I know I should, and I want her to, but I'm not really a great emissary for saying why you should value making sure you're on time.
It makes a lot of sense, Dove. And so speaking of functions, I'm wondering how you experience each of the functions of the ENFP function stack. If you could give us your experience of it.
Sure. So, I lead with my extroverted intuition, which I completely identify with. As I mentioned, I'm always living in the immediate future. And when I see anything, I ideate with it. So I get any piece of information. It's like I throw it up in the air and I look at it from every angle and I think about what it means and what it connects to. So I don't think about what just one thing is. I'm immediately like, oh, it must mean this. And then we could go here. So I'm plotting a line with just some points. And there's nothing more I like to do than brainstorm or, read a New Yorker cartoon or something that makes me have to take a leap, right? It's not 1, 2, 3, it's 1, 2, 5. If you can do the 1, 2, 5, life gets really interesting. And so I find that those are the people I gravitate to, as well as people that think in terms of metaphor and symbol and story, right? And that also means that I have historically not been great at details or facts or remembering all the dates. Like the things like that aren't as important to me or haven't been. And So that's how I go through the world, perceiving the world. What's everything mean? How's it related to everything else? And what my judging function is, how I make decisions, is with my introverted feeling, which is very much, I have a right and sense of right and wrong, like my own moral code. And it's introverted, right? So you're not going to know. So growing up in my house, one of the values growing up was that you were supposed to treat, wait staff very well, the lunchroom ladies and a server. And I can remember in high school being out on a date, and the young woman I was with did not, in my opinion, was not nice to the server. And I had made a decision. That's it. I'm never seeing her again. I didn't tell her, right? ENFP is introverted feeling, and I was at that point not really looking to have a difficult conversation. But yeah, that was an introverted feeling. So that's a perfect example. You're nice to people like this, and then I'd always, be nice to them, or how it worked. But that's how I made decisions, and how, what felt right. So it was much more, I would stand up for principle, and sometimes that was noble. Sometimes I could be wrong and young, and immature. But that's totally how I went, with a surety that I was right. I didn't make a pro and cons list. I just knew how it felt. I definitely made my decisions from my introverted feeling heart. Because I was a feeler, though, I would say that that part of me helped me connect to more people that were empathetic on the whole throughout my life, even though most guys weren't. And so it explains a lot of the friendships that I had. And my tertiary is extroverted thinking, which I have an interesting relationship with. So introverted thinking, bringing order to the world, bringing to the order to the world around you, structuring things, making sure everything is in its right place and goes where it needs to go. And that's always been hard for me. When I was young, I had so little structure and liked staying up in the middle of the night and write all my papers and thought that was my identity. And as I've gotten older, I've gotten to appreciate more of that extroverted thinking of making sure, straightening out, my space, cleaning out my space, making sure my papers are in order, my desktop, being on top of things, more often. That extroverted thinking, making smarter, better decisions just by slowing down. So that's when I'm good, when I'm bringing in that extroverted thinking and allowing myself to use that I think I'm at my best. I think it's, kind of the best part of my 50-year-old is when I'm using that. And I try to be more and more, organized now, not getting things in late, things like that. So that's been an interesting, but it's still, I'm stressed. That's going to kind of go away, and I'm going to go, shoot into my extrovert intuition. And then, as we talked about, in the fourth position is my introverted sensing. And, it's one of the reasons I meditate. I've been a 5-day-a-week meditator for about 9 years now. Really helps quiet my mind. I really recommend it for anybody, but especially for us extrovert intuitors, it's really a great practice. And just trying to slow down, right? That introverted sensing, take your time, measure twice and cut once. I got to remind myself of that all the time, right? I just want to go, cut it and go. What's the next thing? I'm moving fast. And so my introverted sensing and trying to slow me down and take care and put things back where I found them and read the directions on the box before I start to build it, and all of those things that I have slowly gotten better with. And I think that fatherhood has helped me do that, as I've had to put together so many things through instructions from IKEA for my, daughter's furniture and things. But, that's kind of how I go through. So my whole point of life, just like Jung said, is to try to bring those things that are more unconscious up to the top as we live, and come more to the middle in all things.
Yeah. The extroverted thinking of becoming more structured, and the introverted sensing of being more careful right off the bat, and dependability. Yeah. So what I'd love to know, Dove, is how it's like to be present as an ENFP.
Well, it's interesting because as I mentioned, that's one of the things that I work on with my clients, is teaching how to have presence, which starts with being present. And so as an extrovert intuitor, that's not how I'm built, is to be present. I'm built to be over there. a little step ahead of everybody else, thinking about what it means, what it could do. So if I'm spacing out, it's because I'm taking the thing that you're talking about and I'm immediately connecting it to a lot of other thoughts, right? And so it can be an intuitive breakthrough. Oh my God, how'd you get there? And other times I can just kind of get lost in the conversation. But presence is all about being present and not having your brain be scattered. So how can I really pay attention to you who are right in front of me? Right. And so that's where, as an ENFP, you really want to start getting into your introverted sensing and bringing it online. Right. Really paying attention to what you're listening to, or what you're hearing. Or maybe I'll just take 60 seconds and turn my ears into satellites and just listen, just to calm it down. Right. Just to pay more attention, to recognize my goal is to always move forward. And that is not have that same kind of gravitas you're looking for when you want to project your brand, right? Your leadership brand of being present and powerful and warm. So you really need to stop. And so that's where I think ENFPs can sometimes get in trouble. They think they're fascinating, and it might be fascinating, but you're moving too fast and you're leaving people. So how can you make sure that you're connecting to your audience and bringing them along, recognizing that not everybody's going to think as fast as you, in the same way that you're not going to remember to have brought the lunch or whatever you were supposed to bring. That's because you were thinking about how you were already connecting these things. So as an ENFP, to be present means to slow down.
Slowing down is a good piece of advice for extroverts who move really fast in the external world and sometimes need to learn to go back into the reflective world and slow down and really soak up the experience too, as well.
Yeah. I mean, anybody that's been in class, in school with ENFPs, probably, depending on their type, got annoyed that we would just call out answers or questions without raising our hand, or would sometimes start talking before we realized what we really wanted to say. And so it's been really interesting as I've gotten older to really slow that down. So like, for instance, for me, and this is a lots of extroverts, but definitely ENFPs, when you're with somebody or a few people, and there's a silent moment, that is a moment crying out to be rescued, right? That's like a drowning man in the lake. You need to jump in and save him. And I have become more and more fascinated by what actually develops if I just don't say anything and jump into that silent moment. If I just let it stay, which for me can seem just interminable at 6 seconds, 10 seconds, but waiting and then seeing what comes out, and then someone who needed more time to get their thoughts together says something really interesting. And so that has been a real great development for me over the years that I would recommend to, all extroverts. The same thing, my wife needs a lot more time to formulate her thoughts. So it doesn't help if I'm just rapid fire. So I've learned to stop and wait at the dinner table, at the party, what have you.
Yeah, I think that is a wonderful piece of advice. And so the last question I have for you, Dove, is what piece of advice would you give to ENFPs?
Meditate. Honestly, I think I would say, like, if you recognize that your strength is how you can move through the world and your energy, and how you can often affect the energy of those around you and inspire people and tell stories, but everything is moving forward, then what you really want to work on is developing that inner calm, right? ENFPs can go through the world completely energetic and enthusiastic, and those are usually two words that are associated with them. If they ask friends and family to, give them a list of words, what do you think I am? Like, those are big ones, the energy, enthusiastic. And so I would say cultivate that inner calm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Listen to Thievery Corporation, right? It's like energetic chill. It doesn't all have to be electronic dance music, like just energetic chill. That's what you're going for. You'll always be able to pull out the mad scientist, lots of ideas, but the more you can cultivate the inner calm, the happier you're going to be, the better partner you're going to be, and just the more rounded person you're going to be.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. ENFPs really trying to develop that sense of inner calm so they don't always have to be moving fast in the world. Like you mentioned, filling up silences when they can really just stay in the silence and see what beauty that could bring them. Silent moments seem like there's something to be fixed for some people. And sometimes silence can feel a little scary too, because it's like, oh, is that person judging me in that silence? So a silence can it can feel a little difficult to let that exist and just be. So I think that it's really good advice to cultivate that sense of inner calm and really develop that inner world. Yeah. So wonderful, wise pieces of advice, Dove. You've been in the type community for a very long time. And yeah, you're providing those executives that you coach really valuable gems of personal development and giving them lessons that you've learned of being present as an ENFP in your workplace as well, teaching other people how to be present too, and to use that to inspire. There's this kind of enthusiasm that ENFPs bring and this vibrancy. And so, because they're able to listen to their inner compass to see if things resonate, they really do, when they cultivate that introverted feeling, they're able to help others with finding what resonates and aligns with them and really how to put that out into the world. It's almost like strengthening your radio signal and you're teaching people how to fine tune their signal so that more people will see it because it has a wider strength and a wider radius in which it hits. So
Right. And I would even say, I would use it a slightly, I would tweak the metaphor a little bit and say, like, ENFPs are used to moving very fast and get their identity around moving fast and keeping people with them and jettisoning people and going forward. And so the more they can learn to walk at other people's paces sometimes, to just slow their pace, perfect example of, not jumping into the silence, it opens up a whole new world. Like, because our energy can overwhelm the situation, often for good, but it will overwhelm it and nothing else will come out. So the more you can keep it, use it, but don't let it use you. And the more sometimes you can be quiet or let other things develop, the more interesting the world will become.
it teaches the ENFPs a new tool in their tool set by letting them know the option of staying silent too. Because oftentimes we don't know that we have that choice until someone brings it into awareness. So you are the bringer of awareness for ENFPs and the people that you coach. And so thanks, Dove, for handing us the nuggets of wisdom you've had from your relationship with your INFJ, and also the emphasis you put on being present and how meditation is one of the avenues in which you can be present. But yeah, that's a cool little reframe to get people to really focus on what matters. And so thank you for coming out, and thank you everyone for watching. I'll see you all in the next episode. Take care. Bye.
It was a pleasure. Thanks. Bye.